Hey tribe! So I wanted to expand upon my last post about shadow work and talk a little bit more about what the shadow is, what shadow work is, and why it's important to continue this process of integrating the shadow back into wholeness. And let's start with what the shadow is. Forgive me if I look down at my notes. I do have some notes here with me. So the shadow is any part of ourself that we have rejected, denied, or disowned. This can also take the form of traumatic experiences that we have suppressed because they were too painful to deal with. And the shadow can manifest as through personality, or it can manifest through toxic habits or addictions. And shadow work, this is the process of integrating our shadow and accepting all parts of ourselves to become the liberated, sovereign beings that we are, rooted in our wholeness. And this can be simply thought of as making peace with both our dark and our light aspects to integrate into the trinity of wholeness. And so in terms of shadow work, the hardest parts of ourselves to look at are also the parts that need the most love and attention, or need the most love and acceptance rather, and they get that through tending to them with our attention. And why integrate? So why integrate? Why do this shadow work? It's definitely not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that, and anyone who does their own shadow work, I'm sure, can agree with me, because it's basically coming face to face with the deepest, darkest parts of yourself that are really hard to love and accept. But I like to think of the shadow as just a wounded child, a wounded, lost child who needs our love and support. And so if the shadow remains unintegrated, it begins to manipulate our personality and infuse into our relationships, finances, career, and even health. So it's so important. And the aspect of projection also comes in here, because any parts of ourselves that we turn a blind eye to often gets projected out onto present day people, places, and situations. And I'm sure you can understand how much of a pickle that can get us into. This comes with the idea that what irritates us the most are qualities that we ourselves carry. So what's the solution? I have a 4-part solution of shadow work, a 4-part shadow work process for you. So number 1 is identification and acknowledgement. We identify what our particular flavor of ego is, because we all have certain tendencies or dispositions that manifest as the ego, and the ego is simply the false self, or you can think of it like the wounded or separate self. And basically the process of identifying already helps let the shadow lose its grip over you, because you can see it for what it is and identify it when it comes up later on. And so to stop the false self or ego from running the show, we lean into the shadow and acknowledge that it's there. And this is where I think a lot of people become fearful, because they think it's better to turn a blind eye to it and pretend like it doesn't exist. But this feeds into the truth that what we resist persists, and what we run from ends up running us. So acknowledging and leaning into the shadow actually has the opposite effect. It helps to free us from the bondage of operating from our false self. And it actually gives us more power in that way. It gives our true self more of the power, and our false self less of the power. Because the process of integration is that of wholeness, and it is uniting our masculine, feminine, light, and dark into one. So yes, first gateway. identification and acknowledgement. Number 2 is to ask the shadow aspect what it needs or why it's here and meet that need. So we all have basic needs, and we must identify our need in order to meet it in a healthier way outside of dysfunctional personality patterns or behaviors. Number 3 is to find the lesson, the treasure within the shadow. So every storm holds its rainbow, and I think we can all agree that the world is much more beautiful with all the rainbows in it. So what is your shadow aspect teaching you? How would your life be different if it wasn't here, or if that certain traumatic event never happened? Number 4 is to transform the shadow into its higher octave. So every expression has both its negative and positive pole, and the idea is to bring that expression at least back to neutrality or the positive aspect. So let's use an example here. I have the example of greed. So greed is a common shadow aspect that is expressed through ourselves, possibly, or through humanity. And it's a very natural emotion or tendency. So greed, we identified it, we acknowledged it. Number 2 is to ask it what it needs, why it's here. So greed simply is the desire for pleasure. It's the desire for pleasure and satisfaction and having enough. And so that's the need. Let's meet that in a healthy way rather than wanting to be greedy and keep everything for ourselves. So I like to do this in a way that transforms any greediness into feeling like I have enough. So how can you meet the need of pleasure, satisfaction, having enough through another way that is not expressed as greed? Maybe it's appreciation or celebration or, finding satisfaction in what you already have. Really, I think gratitude would be a great one for meeting the need of greed, of just being grateful for what you have and feeling like you have enough, not feeling like you need more. Number 3 rather, is what is the lesson or gift within the greed? And for me, the lesson or gift that I thought of was that there's enough for everyone. That is the lesson, is that, greed is always going to have that insatiable hunger. But when we can really feel and take to heart that lesson that there is enough for everyone, then the greed really loses its hold on you. And finally, number 4 is transforming it into the higher octave. And so greed is here. And then we have the lower octave, which is being ravenous. It's that insatiable hunger or thirst for more. And that can further be fractalized into envy. So being envious of other people because you're ravenous and you feel like there's not enough. And that's the underlying force behind greed, is that fundamentally you feel like you're not enough, or that there isn't enough. And then the higher octave of greed is a healthy appetite. So instead of being ravenous, you have this natural appetite and appreciation for pleasure and for things that are going to nourish you. And that can further be fractalized, healthy appetite, into appreciation and celebration. And that's what I really love to transform greed into, or like envy, because that's an aspect of greed, is to be like, just because someone is this or has this or has done this doesn't have any say on what I am or what I can do. Actually, the fact that I feel that resonance in that way shows me that that's something in myself that I can further develop. And so celebrating others' successes and appreciating what you have is so, so vital and very transformative. So transforming into the higher octave, healthy appetite, appreciation, celebration. So I hope that example made sense. I did the best I could, and you can really apply that to any shadow aspect that you may be dealing with through those 4 steps: identification, acknowledgement, ask what it needs or why it's there, and meet that need. Find the lesson or gift, and transform to the higher octave. So thank you so much, and take care.